I should tell you that I've known Eric since the 3rd grade. So I could do this introduction in a whole lot of ways, some of which I'm sure he's terrified I might actually do. But that won't happen. I'll actually just tell you this. Eric is one of those supremely talented folks who could have done anything. I mean, he actually had a signed music contract with Motown before they disappeared, and a variety of other things. So I feel almost like I'm in his shadow, so this is his payback to me, I guess, is doing things like this, all right? But I thought this was an incredibly good topic. Anybody who can get some of the Fox News folks to call them names is somebody I appreciate. And I thought it would be good if a lot of other additional folks got to appreciate him too then. So if you get a chance and you don't already, listen to NPR, because he is the TV critic for NPR, which is a newly formed position for NPR. They didn't have that before. So they were impressed with him also and brought him on. But if you haven't had a chance to read the book, please do so. It is very interesting, and it goes beyond just race. It really does talk around how the media is purposely divisive. And we all sort of know that, but I think it's a good thing when it's put out there as almost an official statement. You know, this is true and there are reasons for it. So I'm going to let Eric tell you what those reasons are, so without further ado, Eric. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I think he wasn't divulging all those secrets because I got stuff on him too. That works both ways. But no, thanks a lot, Pat. Pat was the best man at my wedding, and I'm still getting back in it for that. And so yeah, we go back a long way. So I was really happy to come here. I was in town for several other things too, so this is just a wonderful. Whenever I get a chance to talk about the book, I really take advantage. So thank you very much for welcoming me here. I'm from Florida, and I've given speeches recently in Wisconsin, Boston, and Chicago. So yeah, I'm an idiot. I'm in Florida, and I'm going up north in the middle of the worst snowstorm in history. Every time I land somewhere, there's like a snowstorm the next day. So let me apologize for everything that you're going through here, because it's mostly my fault. But you came out and we're going to have a good talk about the themes in my book, Race Bigger. Working on a book like this can be really depressing because I wrote this mostly in early 2012. And if you remember March 2012, that was when Trayvon Martin was killed and became an international story. And Florida was besieged. I mean, we're already besieged by CNN, Inside Edition, and all these places. But ground zero for cable news for a month and a half. And just as that was ending, and I had to revamp some chapters in the book to deal with it, then Sandra Fluff went before Congress and said, hey, it'd be a nice idea if my college insurance program covered contraception. And Rush Limbaugh decided that she was a whore and a slut, and we should be able to watch YouTube videos of her having sex. All things of which he said on his radio show. So then there was a backlash to that, and I had to revamp the radio chapter. But it could be depressing, sorting through all of this stuff. Some of the attacks can be pretty awful. But I realized that this is really the result of something very special that America's trying to do. We're trying to create this country where our diversity is our strength, right? And so there are going to be people who will be obstructionists of that, who will feel threatened by that, who will try to make money off of that. And this is what results. So, my book is a way to sort of clear away some of the obstacles, point out some of the problems, and push us more towards that future where we're celebrating our differences instead of feeling threatened or fearful about it. So whenever I have these talks, I have a few ground rules. Now, the first is that this is a conversation, and tough as it is to talk about this stuff, we have to talk about it. One of the things that I always hear from people is that I'm the troublemaker for even bringing out this stuff in the first place, right? But those of you who are married, if you have a problem in your relationship and you don't talk about it, or you talk about things that are sort of on the side, on the periphery, you never solve the problem, right? And you always keep fighting, right? You always keep having arguments that are about the same thing. So you really need to own up and face the real situation, right? People of color, we're talking about this stuff all the time. I'll tell you that right now. we're always trying to figure out our identity and how our identity relates to the mainstream / white culture. And the great strength of white culture is that white culture doesn't see itself as a racial culture. And so part of my struggle is to get white people to realize that you have a racial culture too, right? And it affects how you make decisions, it affects the values that you have, it affects how institutions work in society. And it's not just something that's a problem for people of color, right? It's a problem for all of us. Mistakes don't make you a racist. We're going to talk about some things that maybe you will remember, ooh, I thought that way, ooh, I did that kind of thing. And just bear in mind, I'm not saying you're a bigot, and I'm not saying that you're a racist. I'm just saying that occasionally you can make a mistake. And we'll go over how that can happen. Third, everyone gets respect. So on the off chance that there is a Fox News fan here, please, this is going to be a conversation. Raise your hand, and I will explain to you very patiently why you're wrong. And then finally, these concepts apply to many marginalized groups in America. So I'm going to talk a lot about black and white because I think that's sort of the central fissure. That's the itch we can't stop scratching. That's the difference that goes back hundreds of years. And indeed, that's the reason why we have these racial identities that we're struggling with anyway, and we'll talk about that. But it also applies to gay people. It also applies to Arabs. It also applies to Asian Americans, Hispanics, and women. Anyone who is powerless or marginalized in America, these different ideas and concepts in media moments will apply in some way, and we'll talk about that as well. So, I cobbled together this talk at first for college students, so forgive me if it's a little simplistic in some places. But one of the things I want to point out is that media messages hinge on values. The reason why they have power, the reason why you might want to cry when you see a Budweiser commercial with a little dog and a horse. Come on, you saw it during the Super Bowl. Come on, you know you want to cry all of this. Is because these commercials, these media messages, hinge on values that you unconsciously realize, that you unconsciously respond to. So I would ask college students, for example, this guy's a villain, right? How do we know he's a villain? He has a black hat on. How else? He has a black coat on. How else? He's standing over a tired person on the railroad tracks. And he's ugly, right? He's ugly. Right? He has a mustache, but he's also unattractive, right? So that's how we know he's a villain. How do we know this guy's a good guy? Right? The white hat? He's a good-looking guy. He's a good-looking white guy. Right? White hat, good-looking white guy, trusty force. Okay, that's a hero. That's a villain. You know that in the second of seeing them because there are values embedded in that visual image that's being shown to you. That people who are in black are less trustworthy. People who are ugly are less trustworthy. People who look good are people you can trust. The guy with the white hat on is a hero. Right? People are making those decisions very quickly and not thinking about it. Right? And there's other decisions that you make about race and culture that are also values that people will try to engage without even thinking about it. Right? So let's talk about the values shown here. This is a clip from a reality show called Big Brother. Okay. Now, some of us don't necessarily watch that much reality television, so I'll explain. Big Brother is a show that airs on CBS during the summer. They take 16 people, they put them on a studio space that's designed to look like a house, and they have to live together for 3 months. They kick a person out every so often, and whoever survives gets $500,000. Right? It's like Survivor combined with your worst college experience ever. Right? Well, Big Brother last year, they had a problem with white contestants in the house expressing racist ideas about people of color in the house. This is not the first time that's happened. But this is the first time that CBS aired it on television because they were forced to. Because people, you can watch internet feeds 24/7 and show you everything that happens in the house. But CBS takes footage that happens over a few days and boils it down to a single hour-long show that they'll here on Sunday and Tuesday and Thursday, right? So in years past, when white contestants would say racist things, they just would put it in the show. But people saw this stuff happening on the internet and they started talking about it and it became news stories. And then suddenly CBS had to air it, right? So here's a little sample of what went down inside the house. Can I have that, can I have that microphone?
They can't start at the dark side because she's already dark, so. Be careful what you say in the dark, you're gonna be able to see the edge. Yeah.
Let me try that one more time.
Probably is going to Asian right now. But if Andy ends up getting MVP, no one's gonna vote for whoever that queer puts up. They can't start at the dark side because she's already dark, so. Be careful what you say in the dark, you're gonna be able to see the edge. Yeah.
Okay, so now she said that. Now, oh, you could hear, okay, so the first scene she was in the kitchen mixing some food, and she said, I probably look like a smoky Asian now. In the second scene, she was talking with some friends about who might get voted out of the house, and she said nobody's going to vote for who that queer might put up to get voted off, who's a gay person in the house. And then at the last scene, there were several people who were talking about a black woman in the house, and she said, be careful dealing with her in the dark, you might not be able to see the bitch. So those are the three things that she said. So now, when she got kicked out of the house, that bottom one, she was confronted by Julie Chen, the host of Big Brother, who is also Asian American, about what she said, and this was her response.
Being Southern is a stereotype, and I have said some things that have been taken completely out of context in the world book, and I do not mean to ever come off racist. That's not me, and I apologize to anyone that offended for that. I cannot remember saying those things, and those things that was not meant to be serious, and if I said those things, I feel horrible for that, and I regret that. I don't even know what else to say about that, but I'm not.
Okay, so her explanation was first, people were responding to the stereotype, and then she said, I don't remember saying those things, and then she said it was a joke, and I didn't mean it to be racist, right? A lot of denial about what she had said and what she had done. Now, the thing is, I think she actually believes that. Because I think she's suffering from what I call bigotry denials. Right? My good friend Paul Dean, another high-profile sufferer of this. People think that in order to express prejudiced thoughts and express thoughts that are rooted in bias, that you have to be a bigot, that you have to be somebody walking around with a white sheet in front of your car. But you don't. Ideas about prejudice and stereotypes are pernicious. They're seductive. They help explain the world in ways that are comforting. And they also help unite you with other people who might think the same way you do, right? So even though we know that kind of thinking is ugly, it doesn't necessarily seem that ugly sometimes when you're employed in your everyday life. Her defense, her BDS, is that I dated black guys, right? This guy, and her mother held a press conference right after the episode aired with all the racist stuff in it to say that Erin is not prejudiced. She dated a black guy, right? How could she be prejudiced? But here's the thing. Prejudice is seductive, and it's easy to use against people we don't like, right? So there could be black people that you like, they harm, and hang out with, but when the chips are down, and it's time to get somebody kicked out of the house, and you're trying to ostracize them, you turn to prejudice, you turn to stereotypes, you demonize them, and exclude them from the group. And we see this happen a lot in reality TV shows, right? So we understand why Erin might indulge in prejudice and then turn around and think she's motivated, right? Why? With CBS and Big Brother, how did the racism of this white lasted for so long, right? Finally, she had to deal with it. This has happened in the house the year before, and in fact, I talked about it in the book. You know, one of the things that surprised me, my book got printed in October of 2012. All this stuff happened in the house in July of 2013. And I already have the whole first third of my chapter of reality TV talks about racism on Big Brother that was covered out. Right? So why did CBS and Big Brother hide the racism from this white contestant for so long? What's that? They don't want to make the white people watching it uncomfortable. That's one thing. But, you know, conflict. That's what reality TV is bred on, right? It's just another kind of concept.
Not to lose sponsors.
They don't want to lose sponsors, so don't worry about that. Right? The public might reject it, right? Anything else? Well, I want to know, so I went to a black woman who had been on the show. Her name is Gina Simone Benson. She was on Big Brother 11. She says, I have a better chance of surviving a Klan rally than surviving Big Brother. This is Red State TV we were creating. That's the audience producers were trying to appeal to. And who won the show on the year that she competed? Jordan Wilson. Right? And not only did she win that show, she went on to appear on The Amazing Race, another Big Brother series, and CBS Web Travel Off series. What you find with CBS is they create stars on one reality TV show and then they export them to others. So someone who's popular on Big Brother, they put them on Amazing Race, and they hope all the people who like them on Big Brother will then watch The Amazing Race. And then they put them on Survivor, and they put them on another Big Brother as returning champions. Or they use them on web series, right? So that's a brand that they protect. They didn't want to show them saying racist things in the house because they don't want to destroy this big brand that they're building up that's going to help all the other reality shows, right? But who gets to be a part of that brand, right? Who gets to be the all-American couple? This, Brendan and Rachel, they've been on Big Brother 12 and 13, Amazing Race, and Amazing Race 24, the one that's debuting right that debuted in February. Jeff and Jordan have been on two Big Brothers and Amazing Race, and like I said, a CBS web series. So who gets to be all-American and who isn't? Who gets their racism covered up? Who doesn't? Right? And why? I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Oh, I said it's obviously CBS's racist.
CBS is moneyist. CBS wants to make money. And so they're tolerating the racism and covering up, in some cases, the racism of their contestants because they want to protect the brand because they want to make money. You know, for them it's not about race, for them it's about developing a star and earning money off that star. Who gets their legal mistakes forgiven and who doesn't? Right? George Zimmerman, who shot Trayvon Martin, in some circles is a conservative hero. This is a 2005 booking club. He was arrested for obstruction of justice because an undercover officer was trying to arrest a friend of his and he tried to stop him. Right? That's a mugshot of his wife. When they had a bond hearing on whether or not he was going to get out of jail after he got arrested for shooting and killing Trayvon Martin, she lied about their finances. They didn't reveal that they had earned over $100,000 over the internet in contributions. They could have used it to pay his bail. So she got arrested, right? When the trial was going on, Zimmerman's attorneys released these photos that had been taken from Trayvon Martin's cell phone. Someone's hand on a gun, a marijuana plant, and what looked like him smoking one, right? He was smoking some marijuana and he was smoking a cigarette with marijuana. And this was an image that was taken from his social media accounts and posted on white supremacist website called stormcrop.org early in the Zimmerman case. It shows him with some gold rims on his teeth. And those images were then republished by a Business Insider website and a website called 50.com and eventually on the Huffington Post and many other news websites. But they started on a white supremacist website. Right? So who gets their legal mistakes forgiven and who doesn't? Who is a thug and who isn't? You guys know who this is? Who is that? Richard Sherman, right? He's a famous football player who scored a touchdown and then went on a brief rant on Fox News, or on Fox Sports. Fox was covering the game. And he went on a brief rant because he had a problem with one of the other guys on the other team. And it caused this deluge of commentary, people calling him a thug, right? He's a football player who just made a touchdown and scored an in-your-face touchdown against a guy who he had a rivalry with. And he talked a little trash during the interview. He's a thug. Justin Bieber, how many times did he have to get arrested before people called him a thug? Right? The crack-smoking mayor in Toronto. How many times does he have to get arrested before somebody calls him a thug? Right? These people have criminal records. This guy pulled himself up by his bootstraps, Compton, and got through college and became an NFL football player, everybody who knows him says he's a great guy and a positive force in his community. He says something for 10 minutes on television, and that was a duck, right? Who's a duck? Old media. Okay, when I give this talk at colleges, I always have to explain, I'm assuming for this audience that I don't have to do this. So, Hawkeye Pierce from MASH, right? And Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America. So, when MASH had its finale, it was the most watched episode of television for many, many years until the Super Bowl of 2010. It drew 106 million viewers. The legend was that the water table went down in New York City during commercial breaks because everybody's going to the bathroom. And the most trusted man in America, Walter Cronkite, he expresses doubt in the Vietnam War and all of a sudden domestic support for advantages, right? These are the people who commanded huge audiences. And the way old media works is that it gathers together big groups of people and then sells access to them to advertisers. So CBS gets 106 million people to show up to the MASH finale, and they go to Procter & Gamble, and they go to McDonald's, and they go to Nike, and they say, hey, if you want to sell stuff to these people, you got to pay us for access to this audience, right? In the modern times, almost no media outlet can get together that many people anymore. Only the Super Bowl, and really, really the Olympics, maybe even the Olympics doesn't really draw that many people at one time anymore. So modern media has to look at smaller pieces of that audience and super serve it, give them everything, right? When you're old media, you don't want to put up anything that's divisive or that troubles people or might reject people because you're trying to get the biggest audience possible. When you're new media, you focus in like a laser on a certain kind of consumer, and you give them everything they want to stay with you and to not go to other places, right? So if you're a middle-aged woman and you love women in pearl movies, Lifetime is the channel for you, right? If you're a college-age white guy and you love irreverent humor, then Comedy Central is the place for you, right? And then there's some media outlets that use the same tactics that was used to mobilize political parties. They're now used to mobilize media audiences. So Fox News doesn't just tell the audience that we're better at covering the news than CNN or MSNBC. They say CNN is lying to you, right? They say CNN is corrupt. They say CNN is going to mislead you, and we're the fair and balanced one. It's the same way a politician would say the other guy is a liar, cheat, and steal, right? So what happens to journalism when that's how you get audiences, right? Why should we care about this? Why should we care about prejudice, racism, stereotypes being used to draw people to a channel? Why should we care about that? It perpetuates racism.
It's not accurate.
It's not accurate, right? Don't you want your news coverage to be accurate?
No.
I mean, one of the things I always face is I talk a lot about this stuff to journalists, and they think I'm advocating some kind of kumbaya and everybody's going to join hands and walk off in the sunset together. And I'm saying this is about making sure your news reports are accurate, right? Because reporting based on stereotypes is not accurate. Portrayals of minorities reflect how the majority of society views and treats these issues of people. I lived in Japan for a couple of months. I finished up my last semester in college by correspondence, playing with the band in Osaka, Japan. I couldn't read newspapers. I couldn't really watch the television in another language. But one thing I could do is I could go to movie theaters because they kept the English vocals, and they just had little subtitles in Japanese. So I would go to see movies every so often. And it would be me and maybe one other guy from my band and 150 of our closest Japanese friends, right? Often we were the only Westerners in the building, not the only white people, only Westerners. And I would watch these Hollywood movies and I would see how black people were portrayed. And I would think, you know, if I'm a Japanese person and I've never seen a black person in flesh in my life, what picture would I have of black people, right? I saw this movie, Born on the 4th of July. Tom Cruise plays a Vietnam vet who loses the use of his legs in war. And there's all the black soldiers he meets when he goes to Vietnam are just getting high, they don't want to fight, they're trying to avoid any kind of work. They're lazy and shiftless, and totally the epitome of the stereotype of a lazy, shiftless black person. And then he gets shot, he loses the use of his legs, and he comes back to New York and is treated at a VA hospital. And the black orderlies in the hospital are stealing from the residents and selling them drugs. And the black nurses in the hospital are turning tricks like they're prostitutes. And I'm thinking to myself, as I'm walking out of this thing, what do these Japanese people think about me after they see this movie, right? So these movies and these media presentations tell the world what America thinks of its minority population. Media images resonate, especially with those who have no practical experience, right? If you've never met a person of color, then most of what you know about them comes from the media you consume. And then we talk about accuracy, right? Reporting based on prejudice is ultimately inaccurate. That's what I want you to hear about this. So I'm going to ask you guys to bear with me. I have a short quiz on racial images and kind of gets at some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. It's multiple choice. If you've got a piece of paper and a pen in your hand, you might want to grab it and just sort of keep track of the multiple choice answers here. I've given it for college students, so I trust me it's easy. It's not too much of a challenge, because I don't want to zone out on top of them. But it might be good. And I have, in the past, I have promised to give a free book to whoever gets every question right. Right? So we got something right in. You get a free book. There's not too many. I'll give you a free book. All right. So the first question is easy. How many poor white and black families were there in the U.S. in 2000? Now, don't get confused by the year, because that's not a fair question. I just pulled some of this data from the census of 2000. How many poor white and black families were there in the U.S. in 2000? Were there 18 million black and 8 million white? Or were there 5 million black and 5 million white? Were there 8 million black and 18 million white? Or were there 10 million black and 15 million white? So just pick one black. So more black than white, about even number of black and white, much more black than white, or a little bit more white than black. Okay. All right, pick one letter. What percentage of more than 240,000 athletes, coaches, and related positions in America are black? So basically, all the people except for the media that are involved in many of these professional sports, what percentage of them are black? 60%? Or 5%? 10%? Or 7%? So pick one. 60%, 25%, 10%, or 7%. What percentage of American drug users are black or white? 50% black or 5% black? 25% black, 50% black? 12% black, 50% black? Or 70% black, or 12% black, and 70% black? So basically more black than white, more white than black, a little bit more white than black, a lot more white than black. Pick one. And then finally, true or false, there are more black males in jail than in college? True or false, more black males in jail than in college? Okay, we have a book right. It is false. False. Who said false? There are more black males in school than in jail. 1.4 million black males in school, 800,000. We got them all right. Yeah. Most people do. Why didn't anybody get them all right?
Will we get that information?
What's that?
We get that information.
Yeah, we do get that information now. The one that normally knocks a lot of people out is this one, right? Because everybody thinks about football, and everybody thinks about basketball, and nobody thinks about hockey, they think about golf, they think about tennis, they think about lacrosse, they think about all these sports where not even the players are predominantly African American, right? Let alone coaches, trainers, and GMs. There's no, even in football and basketball, very little diversity in those positions, right? So there's not that many black people involved in the overall structure of the sports world. Another thing people even though drug use disproportionately affects communities of color, the percentage of drug use is right among the population, right? 12%, 70%. So, drug problems, all white people's problems too. Way more than white people's problems, right? But a lot of times arguments about drug policy and drug sentencing laws, it's all about, worrying about black people, and white people forget they have a stake in this too, right? With that.
Eric,
Yes.
would you unpack that comment that drugs disproportionately affect black communities?
Sure. If you look at sentencing, the amount of jail time, and you guys read the Jim Crow, right? Or did that? As part of your group. That lays it all out. Harsher sentences to people of color for drug crimes. Death row is disproportionately populated with people of color. The state of the ground law is more effectively used when you kill a white person. You're more likely to get off using the state of the ground law before you kill a white person than to kill a black person. I mean, there's tons of statistics where you can find that drug use, drug crimes, issues connected to drug use disproportionately affect communities of color. But when you look at the overall universe of people who actually use drugs, they're right on the population. Yes.
Look at the saw the 4 weeks ago here, showed police as if they were in a state of war. They go to black communities and run from house to house and knocking on doors and trying to find people that have drugs. Find people who want to experience the police going to our neighborhood, knocking on doors and saying, going to the drugs.
Yeah, I saw a documentary that had a interview with David Simon, creator of The Wire, and Homicide on the Street. He was a cop for Baltimore for a long time. And he said, due to the war on drugs, which started with some laudatory goals, has become a war on certain communities. Become a war on certain communities. And, it's great to say you want to curb the use of illegal drugs and try to stamp out the crime that's connected to illegal drugs. But the harm that has come from that war on drugs is worse than the problem you're trying to solve, right? So we have to figure out a new way to get at it. So this statistic, now, there have been some people who've gone around and said that there were more black males in jail than in prison, but that's because they were using figures from a study that was flawed and was debunked last year, I believe, maybe a couple years ago. Somebody went back and found that there were a lot of small historically black colleges that weren't part of the original tabulation that led to that conclusion. And they came out with a new study where they concluded there were 1.4 million black males in school and 800,000 in prison. Now that doesn't mean that it is important to try and encourage young black males to stay in school because it is hard for them to do that. But it does mean that we're not telling the successfully. Okay? We're not giving, if you don't give people a sense that they can finish the race, then it's hard to get them to enter it in the first place. So, these answers have a common victimization and stereotypes. We've become used to generating sympathy with people of color by portraying them as victims. And often people of color are victims of institutional racism. But we got to be careful to be on the lookout for the successful race too. Right? And we got to be careful about stereotypes. Always see people of color excelling in sports, have problems with drugs, have problems with poverty. These are issues that resonate beyond communities of color. But sometimes they're labeled as black issues or Hispanic issues, whatever you want to go beyond that. So that's why I wrote this book. The book is both a media literacy book, so it's an attempt to sort of tell you how media works, but it's also a race literacy book. It's an attempt to tell you how race works in America and how those two things kind of play off each other. Right? So I talk about my good friends at Fox News. Chapter 3 talks about how Fox News is focused on scary black people who use race relations as collateral damage. What Fox News does is it creates this alternative universe in the cable landscape where its target audience, they recreate the world as seen by their target audience, right? So their target audience is older, is more politically more conservative, it's more male than female. And that leads them to take a certain position on certain issues, especially issues involving people of color. And one of the things that they like to do is highlight groups of scary black people to scare their white viewers, right? So this is the new Black Panther Party. They've been designated a hate group by the Anti-Poverty Law Center. Southern Poverty Law Center, right? They're anti-Semitic, they're anti-white, and they're really small. But Fox News covered the heck out of them in 2008 and 2012. Gee, I wonder why. Certain black politicians were for like years, right? When Barack Obama decided to hold an event at the White House where he invited a bunch of black celebrities, this is the headline that ran on the Fox Nation blog, which is connected to, it's the blog version of the Fox News channel, right? Obama's hip-hop barbecue didn't create jobs. Now, I didn't realize that barbecues were supposed to create jobs. But apparently they're angry that it didn't. And this is a hip-hop barbecue. Now, some of you will not know this. You may not know this, but how many hip-hop artists are in that picture? 10 people. One. Jay-Z, right there. That's a black comic, that's a black president, and that's a black former NBA star, right? So there's all kinds of things wrong with the blog post, right? But basically what they're doing is they're regurgitating this idea that somehow this black president is going to unfairly advantage black people at the expense of white people. That's the subtext of many other complaints about Barack Obama, right? And we can see how they approach these issues in their coverage of Chris Lang. Chris Lang was an Australian baseball player who was training in Oklahoma. He was out for a job. He got shot in the back and killed by 3 youths. At the time that it happened, it was thought that there were 3 black youths. And Fox News, in particular, and some conservative media outlets, tried to showcase this crime as a reverse Trayvon Martin. Here's a white guy who's out minding his own business, and he got killed by 3 black youths, and how is the world going to react? So, can I have that mic again? I'm going to play a little bit of Fox News' coverage of the Chris Lang shooter.
Is this thing on?
There we go.
As far as Christopher Lee, 22-year-old, a white guy shot by 3 black teens arbitrarily. Why was he shot? That didn't stop Jesse Jackson and President Obama and Al Sharpton from weighing in. Okay.
Right, we're still waiting on the t-shirt.
It's not in yet, I guess. I thought we had it in. It isn't in yet? Wait a second. Maybe they're not weighing in.
You mean, where's the Al Sharpton rally? He's so good at starting rallies.
I feel like the Duke lacrosse non-rape story.
Absolutely. And so, what do you get? You wind up with crickets right now.
Stuff, Oreos. They're planning a Trayvon Martin episode, calling it an American tragedy. But the other American tragedy are those producers and networks and hacks who accept violence through unconscious bigotry. They just don't think it's fair to demand a community what it demands from their own. Even if the crime isn't about race, and maybe it isn't, it's an evil act rooted in destructive lifestyles and broken communities. In the media's eyes, a black teen is invisible until he's a body. And a dead Australian is just the price you pay to be politically correct.
Okay, so that's their view on Chris Lang. They're basically saying these 2 things are equal, and it's a shame that there aren't all these worldwide protests about Chris Lang's death. But I say they're full of it. These 2 things are not, these 2 crimes were not the same. Why was the Trayvon Martin killing considered such a huge issue? Why was the Trayvon Martin killing considered such a huge issue? Folks go for doing nothing. That's bad, but that does happen.
Because so was a certain way.
Jesus Young. weren't away from following him, and he followed anyone, yeah.
His profile, he appeared to be scary.
People are concerned that he was profiled at first, right? All of those are great concerns. How long did it take the police to arrest Ruben? It took the police 44 days to arrest Ruben. After worldwide protests, right, and at least a month of continuous coverage of these journalists, Florida finally got its act together and charged Ruben with murder. Guess how long it took them to find the people who shot and killed this man? No, it was hours. He was killed in the morning and they arrested him by the end of the day. 3 kids. We're going to see them in a minute. So it took them hours to find the people killed, and they were arraigned for murder 2 days later. Right? That's why there's no protest. They caught the killers. They prosecuted. Why do you need a protest? Right? This is the picture that Fox News on its blog originally published of the kids who shot and killed Chris Lang. And the only problem is that that is not the Michael Jones who was part of this group that killed Chris Lang. These are the kids. And that is Michael Jones. He is a black boy. And that is a biracial child, and that is a black kid. There wasn't 3 black kids. It was a black kid, a biracial kid, and a white kid. And all of a sudden, all of these race-hinged arguments that the conservative media was making about what happened there go right out the window, because there was a white person involved. Right?
Did they ever get
Fox News. So what you find is that when you try to make a political point in your coverage, accuracy can suffer. But let's go back to this idea. This coverage is really about fighting over institutional racism. Institutional racism. What's institutional racism? What's institutional racism? It's this idea that there's institutions of society where the way they operate disadvantage color, gay people, disadvantage women in a systemic way, right? It's not about the attitudes of any individual person. It's about the way they operate. There is racism or prejudice or bias embedded in the way the institution works. You have to figure out what to stand on, right? And what's really going on here is that Democrats and MSNBC and liberals believe that this country is still a problem with racism, conservatives, Fox News, conservative media outlets do not. And we never talk about it that way. We talk about fights over welfare reform, we talk about fights over affirmative action, we talk about fights over stop and frisk, we talk about fights over what happened to Trayvon Martin, what happened to Chris Lang. What we don't talk about is this idea that the reason everybody was pissed off about Trayvon Martin is because they thought prosecutors and police in Florida sat on their hands for a month and a half, right? And then it might be happening to other black kids, like Jordan Davis, who happened to be sitting in Colorado Springs playing loud music, and the guy got pissed off and pulled out a gun and shot him and killed him. And the guy was convicted of attempted murder for shooting at his friend, but couldn't get convicted of murder for killing him, right? So there's this feeling that there's something about how these institutions work that still hasn't been dealt with. But we don't talk about that question, and that's the difference, right? That's the difference. To me, it's like having a fight with your wife, where you're really worried about money, but you're fighting about what you spend on McDonald's, or you're fighting about how much gas you put in the car. You're not fighting about the real fight, which is does institutional racism exist, and if it does, how do we deal with it? Right? This is Andrew Breitbart. A lot of people don't know who he is. He was an influential blogger and activist who died last year. I interviewed him 5 weeks before he died of a heart attack for my book. And he was behind the Acorn videos, the videos that were put out that made Acorn look bad and eventually resulted in that civil rights organization being expanded. He helped release the videos of Shirley Sherrod, who was the worker who was supposed to resign when he was falsely accused that she was anti-white and she did her job. He helped develop the Drudge Report, he helped develop the Post. And his big thing is that he feels the NAACP and other groups like it have created an entire paradigm to invent racism on the right in order to intimidate people in society. But he didn't believe in institutional racism. And he believed that groups like the NAACP and the Urban League, the National Association of Black Journalists were unfairly seeking advantage for people of color because everything works the way it's supposed to in America. Right? We're all equal. And if we're all equal, and there's still groups out there saying that we're not, they want an unfair advantage. So he was going to do whatever he could to destroy those groups. And he's not the only one who feels like that, right? In my book, I wrote a study about the Brookings Institution that found that the people they polled, 46% believe that a white person is just as likely to be discriminated against because of their race as a black person and a person of color is to be discriminated against because of their race. 46% is that. When you control Fox News viewers, you look at Fox News viewers, that percentage jumps to 70%. 70% of Fox News viewers believe that white people are just as likely to be discriminated against because of their race as black people or people of color. Right? So this is the kind of programming Fox News has created. Now, I don't know if you saw this great documentary called African Americans that Henry Louis Gates did on PBS back in October. But in the he talks about the earliest beginnings of African Americans coming to, after being brought over to America. And he talks about how the early slavers were conscientious, religious men, right, Europeans. So they had to figure out a way to dehumanize this population that they were going to take, capture, bring over to America, and use as the cheap labor to fuel the tobacco and the cotton industries in America. So this social construct called racial identity became to be invented. In particular, this idea that black people, people of color, are inherently less than, less smart, and that the devil, have no souls, are not as virtuous, are oversexed, are childlike, whatever kind of stereotype human attacks to people of color that we know historically has survived the ages, was birthed in this impulse to dehumanize the people that they had to capture and bring over to America to use to serve these burgeoning industries, right? So America's wealth, early wealth and success, is built literally on the backs of people like this. And this idea that people of color are somehow less than. And now, 400, 500 years later, we're still trying to figure out how to unpack our way through those habits, how to get people to get rid of those ideas, and how to remove them from our institution. That's how far back these notions go. So just to show that criticize levels too, I'll talk a little bit about Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton became a spokesperson for Trayvon Martin's parents when they were trying to pressure Florida authorities into charging him with murder. And I remember a rally, March 22nd, 2012, where he was in Sanford, Florida, and 1,000 people showed up at this rally, collected all kinds of money for the fight, that the family was going to present. And then at 6 o'clock, he called off everything, grabbed Trayvon Martin's parents, sat in front of the camera, hosted his MSNBC show, Politics Nation, for an hour, and then went right back to the rally, collected money for the family. And I thought that was kind of weird. 18 months earlier, Keith Olbermann and Joe Scarborough had been suspended by MSNBC for giving money to political candidates without getting an okay from NBC News. 18 months later, this guy's holding a rally for the family at the center of the biggest news story on the planet, and they got no problem. They had no problem. Guess why they had no problem? Because when the ratings came out that year, MSNBC saw a 60% rise in black viewers in ABC and ratings. It's all about money. Right? It's all about money. You said CBS was racist, they're not racist, they're money based. MSNBC is money based. Right? I tell people, if you want to understand 95% of what happens in media, you have to understand two things: how somebody is making money or how somebody is losing money. Because that's what it's about. I also talk a little bit about Stephanie Cutter. She is one of the liberal fellows on Crossfire. She advised Obama on sowing the military strike in Syria to the American people, and sowing Lawrence Summers as the Federal Reserve candidate in Congress at the same time she was talking about these issues on CNN. And of course, she didn't reveal on CNN that she was working with the White House on these issues. So all of a sudden, you don't have honest brokers, right? Al Sharpton has many reasons for talking about the Trayvon Martin case the way he did, and she has many reasons for talking about certain local ideas that the audience has no idea, that they're rejecting. And if you're an honest broker, you want to make sure that audience knows all the major problems. So I'll take a second and see if you have any questions. Going back to yes.
I'm not going to disagree that Fox News is racist, but what do you say to someone who says, if Fox News is racist and MSNBC is moneyist, what's the difference?
I say they're all moneyist. Number one, I said 95% of everything that happens in the media is everything is money split. So everybody's moneyist. And in fact, what Fox News does in terms of race is about attracting an audience and keeping them from going to the other channels. So also that's connected to money too. But what I also tell people is that everybody wants everything to be equal. They want to say, MSNBC is just as bad as Fox News on every issue. That's not true. When it comes to race, Fox News is way worse than MSNBC on that issue. MSNBC has its own problems that are very different, and I talked about one of them, right? The conflict of interest that they have with Al Sharpton, which I've criticized them for many times. It's one reason why the book came out, I didn't get to go on MSNBC, right? Because I've written some pretty high-profile pieces criticizing the relationship. But to say that MSNBC has the same problems in the way it covers and talks about race as Fox News does is to wish for some fantasy land where it is equal. Right? And that's what we're trying to get at. Yes.
I was just wondering that that particular slide kind of is based on the assumption that those are both news stations. And does anybody really consider, except for the or Fox News, consider Fox or MSNBC, because I consider them two opinion stations. Have your opinion?
People say that, but when news organizations issue reports and stuff, and they cover stuff, people watch it, and they accept the information like it is.
I think the very fact that it's called Fox News is...
yeah, that's their stance. That's sort of the process. Is that it's news. And one of the things I'm also constantly trying to tell people is that, when you go to an individual person and you say to them, is reality TV tried and set up and fake? And they goes, oh yeah. And then you ask them about the reality TV shows they watch. They go, oh yeah, so-and-so did this, and so-and-so did that, and so-and-so, and so-and-so. The shows they love, they don't think they're made up. And even when you ask them about it, and they say, oh yeah, it's made up. When you ask them about the storyline, they believe it because they want to believe it. Right? And so the idea is to say, even though we all say we know that they're opinion channels, we often take in a lot of the information like that. They clothe themselves in the costume of news people, right? They have that ticker, they have that graphic on their shoulder, they're wearing a suit and tie, right? And even though they're saying the most awful things about people's color or women or gay people or whatever you want to say, they come clothed like journalists with a mock-up. People say they watch Jon Stewart to get their news. He's a comedian. Right? So if somebody comes along a news channel, I mean, the main ethic that Jon Stewart has is to tell on that. Right? I find the podcasting that you can trust all the information that's on that show. It's a comedy show. It's like watching Laugh Now and saying, hey, how do I find out about the Nixon administration? Yeah.
It seems nowadays that there's, and maybe it's
pick on both switches at the bottom.
right, maybe it's just my perception, but it seems as though whether it's politicians or people in the news, there's almost this attitude now of say whatever you want. It may be true, it may not be true. Say whatever you want and worry about the damage later on. And so people literally just say whatever they want, and there's nobody ever around to kind of challenge them at the time. It comes out 2 or 3 days later when it's no longer a story. And I don't know, from your understanding, historical understanding, can you find a place where there was this shift to, I don't want to go so far as to say people are lying, maybe they are, but it's this whole attitude of, just say whatever you want and worry about the ramifications later on. And where do you see that going? Does anyone-
Well, I will say that I don't think people are saying just whatever they want. I think the scary thing is that many of these messages are very well thought out and planned. And, Mark Bashir is a good example. That's an MSNBC anchor who did this commentary where he talked about, it's a common irritation for people when conservatives compare something relatively minor to slavery, right? So Sarah Palin, I think, compared the rise in taxes to slavery. So then Mark Bashir says, well, I looked into the writings about the slave owner who actually practiced slavery, and here's some of the things he did. And one of the things he did was that this was his errant slaves. He would make one of the slaves shit in the mouth of the one who was being punished. And then he suggested at the end of it that maybe Sarah Palin should have that kind of punishment, right? Now, this was part of a 5-7 minute speech where they had graphics over his shoulder, right? Now, I've guest hosted theaters a lot of sources 3 times, and I know what you have to do to create something like that. He had to write it in advance, he had to give it to his producers, they had to find the graphics, they had to put that presentation together, they had to time out how long it would take, and then do it, right? So at least 2 or 3 other producers besides him planned out that whole presentation in a day. And then, of course, everybody went crazy. And, he wound up having to apologize to Sarah Palin. He tried to call her personally. She wouldn't take a call. They tried to act like it was something he did on his own, and he's the only one who lost his job. Right? But that was a deliberate presentation, and at least 3 other people at MSNBC were involved in preparing and saying, hey, that's a good idea. Right? So that's the problem. Right? Because they're not just saying what they want. They're having very specific messages, and when they cross the line, then they act like it was somebody to say whatever they want. And they fire that person. And the system will change. Let me move on a little bit. I'll take a few more questions as we go. So chapter 4, he talks about the pitfalls of racism, gender, and politics. And I talk about dog whistles in politics. What does that mean? Dog whistle messages in politics. What are dog whistle messages in politics?
Keywords and phrases, keywords and phrases that just trigger your target audience.
Exactly. So a dog whistle, you blow it, and humans don't hear it, but God does, right? So a dog whistle message in politics means one thing to the general audience, and it means something else to a specific targeted audience. When you think about Ted Nugent, right? Ted Nugent. Okay, I'm ashamed to admit this, and I need to act first. I was a Ted Nugent. I like that trash music. I like everybody. I like the song, right? So it was really troubling to me to see that he gave a speech where he called our Black President Barack Obama a subhuman mongrel, right? In the middle of the diatribe about a bunch of other stuff, he brought this term subhuman mongrel, right? Now, if you know white supremacy, then you know that phrase has a very specific meaning. And white supremacists use that all the time to refer to children that result from biracial marriage. And you also know that that term has a very specific usage that stretches all the way back to World War II. The Nazis used it to describe the Jews, right? But if you don't know that, and you're just watching them go off on this, man, oh, that's just Ted Nugent being Ted Nugent. That's Ted Nugent delivering one message to the general public and reaching out to the white supremacist brothers and sisters and saying, hey, listen to me. I speak your language, right? So that's why it's important to keep an eye on these cohorts of phrases. And then, of course, he did an interview with CNN and he's like, oh, I call everybody subhuman mongrel. All right, okay, yeah. That's not a word out here. So my good friend Newt Gingrich called Barack Obama the food stamp president. The food stamp president. Now, on the surface, he says, you ask him about it, he says, well, more people apply for food stamps under Barack Obama than any other president in recent history. That's true. We've also had the biggest recession in America since the Great Depression. So that might explain it too. But okay. But beneath that is this idea of who don't deserve it, especially other black people. Right? Because we all know most of the black people are right? Right? And guess who won the Republican primary in South Carolina right after we started using that power? It's interesting, Obama confounds his opponents on race sometimes because he approaches it so differently. He refuses to speak on race as a root of power. One of the things we're used to in people like Al Sharpton and Mr. Jackson when they ran for president is that racial justice was a big part of their platforms as politicians, right? Because that's how they make their names. He didn't do that, right? Whenever he did talk about race as a way to racial disparities, he'd say, oh, rising tide lifts all boats. If you make things better for everybody, things get better for people of color too. Not exactly true, but it's good to make things so, right? He has chosen his identity as black, right? So he's biracial. He's the son of an African man and a white American woman, raised by his white parents in Hawaii. But when he finally decides to get married to his black woman, he lived in the area of Chicago where black folks live. When people asked him, when he first started running for president, us journalists were trying to figure out what's wrong, right? And so we asked him, and he said, call me a black man, right? If I try to get a candidate to say, I'm going to find out how black I am, right? So call me a black man. He self-identifies as a black man. He has the ability to choose that, which makes him a little different than someone who is unidentified as black, regardless of what they choose. He doesn't give the easy stereotypes of black politicians. You can take that back to the easy stereotype on race and power. And he sparks more talk on race because of his identity. And a lot of people thought when they elected the black president, we're done. Right? Racial problem solved. We are now post-racial because we have a black president. But what we didn't realize is that we are going to talk about race more now that we have a black president, not less. When Trayvon Martin gets killed, somebody goes to the president and says, what do you think? He says, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. Okay, George Bush is not going to say it. And that takes the conversation to a whole other level. Right? But while we talk about race more, we have a black president who almost never actually talks about race. In my book, I talk about what happened when he tried to talk about race when his good friend, or his friend, Kimberly Gates, got arrested in his home. Harvard professor arrested in his home. The neighbor had seen him trying to break into his own house. He got excused. The cops get there, they realize it's his house, they know who he is, but because he was rude to them or whatever, they arrested him. And so President Obama is giving a press conference on the Affordable Care Act, and he's asked about that, and he says he believes that the police actually do it. Right? Talks about Firestore, hundreds of column inches later, and tons of cable news numbers later, we're having a beer summit where Kimberly Gates and the rest of the president are drinking a beer trying to sound their life. And his unfavorable rating for white voters went up 7 points. And a lesson was, you wait until those water, you're going to pay a price for white voters. So he almost never talks about race. I say in the book, I can't wait to read the book that President Obama finally writes when he gets out of office. Because if you've read his other books, he's a great writer and he writes very eloquently on race, and I can't wait to see what he writes about how Bobby was treated, how Somali treated him, just everything. I can't wait. So, why did some conservatives like Herman Cain so much? Now, Herman Cain was a front runner for the Republican nomination for a brief moment before all that sexual harassment stuff kind of knocked him out of the running. And I couldn't understand why conservatives liked him because, okay, he's a business guy, I guess. We never had a lot of problems before. They just have to say really stupid stuff in public, especially when you talk about world affairs. There is the sexual harassment thing, right? So why did some conservatives like Herman Cain so much? Well, one explanation is that he appeared on Fox News. I just read this book about Larry Field, and he counted up how many times the different Republican nominees, people running for Republican nominations, appeared on Fox News. And he was on Fox News something like 8 hours, over 8 hours, right? Compared to John Huntsman, who was on for less than an hour. Right? So he got lots of support from Fox News. But why else might some conservatives go back?
Did they say we're not racist?
one of the college kids said, he's the Republican Party's black friend. Right? I'm not racist, I got a black friend. But I think it's because he talks about race the way he believes. Right? So he doesn't believe racism holds black people back. He said that in the movies. He believes that black people have been brainwashed and are voting for the Democratic Party. Right? I really hate that. I really hate that black people have been brainwashed and are voting for the Democratic Party. I disproved that in one question. What president since 1960 has gotten the biggest percentage of the black vote? Since 1960. Who? Kennedy? No. Who? Clinton? No. Reagan? No, it's not a Republican. Lyndon Baines Johnson got a bigger percentage of the black vote than Barack Obama. Why is that? He signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Black people vote for people who will represent their interests. And there is a party, a political party that believes in institutional racism and wants to try and dismantle it, and there is a party that does not. Okay? And black people are voting for the party that believes in it. People vote for self-interest. Everybody votes for self-interest. And to suggest that black people have been brainwashed into voting for the Democrats because they're voting for self-interest is prejudice, disability, and bullshit. Anyway, he talks about race the way they do. One of the things that's interesting, I talk about in the book, this linked fate dynamic. This professor at the University of Chicago is where I first saw this mentioned. This idea that is common amongst black folks that we will make political choices based on what we perceive to be the welfare of the entire race rather than on personal welfare. So we have Colin Powell, who is a Republican, who supported Barack Obama and believes in affirmative action, right? And J.C. Watts, who is very conservative and did not support President Obama, but he supports affirmative action as well. What's the big tipping point? Institutional racism. They believe in it. Herman Cain does not. Herman Cain does not. I talk about the Katrina effect. A national conversation on poverty. I remember when Katrina happened, we had all these poor people stuck in the Superdome, stuck on the roofs of houses, stuck in places, dying, tortured. And we said we were going to have a national conversation on poverty and race in America. Do you guys remember it? Because I don't remember it. And I asked Brian Williams, who was anchor about it, he was one of those people who was saying that. And he said, 5 years later, he said, my viewers would rather watch Entourage. That's why I started to have that conversation. When Fox News decided to talk about poverty, when we talked about food stamp program, they did a special report, Great Food Stamp Finish. And they focused on this guy, Jason Greenspan, who supposedly gets $200 a month. And SNAP is the food stamp, it's the actual name for food stamps. He gets $200 a month in food stamps, and sometimes he buys lobster, and they hang out with him, and he's a knucklehead, and he's roasting lobster with his friends. He doesn't have a job, he plays in his band, and he's all, whatever. And so the point of this report, of course, is that, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and all your money is going to these college-age knuckleheads, and they don't, they bring courage not to work, right? But then you look at the actual numbers about these food stamps, and you find out that 83% of benefits go to household with a child, an elderly person, or disabled person. So guess what? 83% of people get food stamps are not going to like this big situation, right? 91% of benefits go to households at the poverty line. The program restricts benefits for able-bodied people in 3 months every 3 years, unless you're in a qualified job training program. So he's only getting $600 unless he's in a job training program, right? Half of all recipients are children. 25 million kids. And unemployment rose from 5% in 2008, the year that Barack Obama ran for president, to 10% in 2009, the year that he became president. That's why Barack Obama is the state president, because unemployment doubled before he even took office. Right? Before he even took office. So that's the reality. And that this is the mirage. Right? And the unfortunate thing about this is that they took copies of that report and they distributed it to members of Congress. So, our lawmakers are using crap like this to make decisions on legislative policy. I think one problem is that the media doesn't report on property, so we don't know much about it. We don't know about the daily lives, we don't know who it's for, we don't know why they're for, we don't know what programs work and what programs don't. Every day you watch a daily news report, you see some report on how the stock market is, whether it's up, whether it's down, right? Daily, can you get a report on poverty? Do you get a report that talks about what people in your area? How you can help them, how they can help themselves? Right? Why? Because it's not all money. They're reporting on poor people. Journalists often only cover race and poverty issues during a crisis. So when somebody gets hurt, somebody gets killed, Trayvon Martin gets killed, Michael Dunn gets off, something big happens and all of a sudden we're going to talk and everybody's polarized and angry and shouting at each other and we can't really communicate, right? We need to figure out a way to talk about these issues regularly, steadily, outside of crisis, outside of Black History Month, outside of the old birthday. Every day. This stuff happens every day. So, how did my book get its name? My good friend, Noah Riley. Here's a story. Oh, okay. Wait a minute.
Riley, thank you for watching us tonight. The white backlash against Reverend Wright and racist accusations, that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points Memo. Have we been reporting millions of Americans of all colors are fed up with race figures and accusations of racism? This wild stuff has been going on far too long, and now with the right controversy, critical mass has been reached. Here's a partial list of people that Jesse Jackson's organizations have labeled racist. President Bush the Elder, President Reagan, Newt Gingrich, Don Imus, Trent Lott, Gary Hart, and Americans will no longer even think about discussing race with blacks. It is far too dangerous. Any slip of the tongue can lead to big trouble. One of the biggest race baiters in the country writes for the St. Petersburg Times newspaper. Eric Diggins also serves as the chairman of the Black Journalist Media Monitoring Committee. Diggins takes delight in branding people racist. Senator Joseph McCarthy would love this guy.
That's where the title of my book is from. If I was the biggest race baiter in the country, I take issue with a couple of things. Number one, I do not like calling people racist. I wish I didn't have to do that. I do believe that the word racism is sort of a death cod non-positive word, something you really only use when it's the most extreme version of prejudice that you're looking at. Really what we're talking about is prejudice, bias, stereotypes, things that are not outright racism. And I don't think Joseph McCarthy would like it at all. But the bottom line is, and I don't even really know why he went after me, except that I have often criticized how he talks about race on the show. And somebody told me that, I wrote about this, in a bunch of different places, and telling friends about it. A friend of mine said, you should write a book about how when you want to have an honest conversation about race, people turn around and try to shut you up by calling you a race baiter. I said, what? That's a pretty good idea. Because the point is, I'm trying to redefine the term a little bit. I'm trying to take all these implicit ideas that are starting to back in our head about race, how media works, how difference works in America, and make them explicit. Because one of the things we find in studies, surveys, and academic journals is that if you are forced to consider an idea that might be rooted in race and prejudice, often that's enough to get you to reject it. Right? The problem is when you make snap decisions. Think about it. You see that guy in the black hat, automatically confused with gold. You see that guy in the white hat, automatically think, oh, well, that's the hero, right? We can make you think about that process, put some consciousness in the middle of that feedback loop. Then often, people will reject the prejudice on their own. So I'm redefining race baiter. Bill O'Reilly's calling me a race baiter. Maybe that's good. So, if you got any other questions, that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take them. And I hope you'll be willing to take some books. We've got books for $15 in the back, and that's almost half price of what you would pay at 5 books. So, thank you very much.